Welcome back. Tonight, we explore the cursed streets of Morgue City, the secrets buried inside Call of Duty Zombies' Shadows of Evil. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what games you want me to cover next. And subscribe if this helps you sleep. The Shadow Man was never human. Before the zombies, before the rituals, before Morgue City even knew what darkness was creeping through its streets, the being you know as the Shadow Man was something else entirely. He was once a keeper, one of the ancient beings tasked with preserving balance across the multiverse, keeping the cosmic scales between light and dark from tipping too far in either direction. The Keepers existed long before human history, residing in a place called Agartha, and their role was essentially divine stewardship of reality itself. But this particular keeper grew curious about the dark ether, the dimension beyond their own, a realm of pure corrupting energy, and began experimenting with it. That curiosity rotted him from the inside out. The dark ether's energy doesn't just change you, it consumes you, twists you, reshapes your values and goals into something monstrous, while leaving just enough of your original mind intact for you to still feel like yourself. He fought alongside other corrupted keepers in a conflict known as the War of Agartha, battling his former brethren. They lost. He and every other corrupted keeper were defeated and banished into the dark ether as punishment, left to fester in that lightless dimension for eternity. Except eternity, as it turned out, wasn't quite long enough to break his will. From within his prison, he continued to reach outward, to whisper into the minds of the living, to plant seeds of destruction across multiple dimensions. By the time you first hear him narrating the opening of Shadows of Evil in that silky, menacing baritone, you're hearing the voice of something that has been scheming for longer than human civilization has existed. Jeff Goldblum as Nero Blackstone. The character of Nero Blackstone, the flamboyant, increasingly frantic illusionist of Morgue City, is voiced and motion captured by none other than Jeff Goldblum. Yes, the same Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, Independence Day, and the Grand Budapest Hotel. Treyarch didn't just recruit a celebrity for the name recognition. They specifically chose actors whose screen personas already carried the qualities they needed for each character. Goldblum's naturally eccentric, rambling, intellectually arrogant energy fits Nero like a tailored suit. Every time Nero launches into one of his self-important monologues, trips over his own fear while trying to maintain dignity, or delivers a terrified observation about the Apothecons with the kind of dramatic timing only Goldblum could manage naturally, you're hearing a performer fully inhabiting a role rather than simply reading lines. The motion capture means Nero also moves the way Goldblum moves, those long-fingered gesturing hands, the slightly unsteady bravado. Nero was described officially by Treyarch as a showman of great renown, whose popularity had plummeted so far he'd been crowned Worst Magician of the Year by Magician's Weekly magazine, a detail that makes Goldblum's casting feel even more intentional, because nobody plays dignified failure quite like he does. Ron Perlman as Floyd Campbell. Floyd Campbell, the hard-edged boxer with a survivor's pragmatism and zero patience for anyone's nonsense, is given life by Ron Perlman. The voice and face behind Hellboy, the formidable Clay Morrow from Sons of Anarchy, and decades of iconic genre performances. Perlman brings weight to Floyd that few other actors could manage. When Floyd tells the group exactly what he thinks of them, when he grumbles about their situation in plain, unvarnished terms, when he swings between moments of cold practicality and unexpected vulnerability, Perlman makes every word land with the texture of scar tissue. The casting works because Floyd isn't a hero or a villain. He's a survivor. Someone who spent years getting knocked down in the boxing ring only to get back up, then committed the worst act of his life in the service of ambition and desperation, and now finds himself in a city overrun by the dead, being asked to atone. Perlman understands that specific flavor of world-weary moral complexity instinctively. Floyd and Nero dislike each other openly, with Floyd finding Nero's theatrical personality insufferable, which means any scene featuring both Goldblum and Perlman is essentially two Hollywood legends refusing to get along inside a zombie apocalypse, and somehow it works beautifully. Heather Graham as Jessica Rose. Jessica Rose, burlesque dancer, femme fatale, and the most immediately dangerous person in the entire Shadows of Evil cast, is voiced by Heather Graham, known for roles in the Hangover trilogy and Boogie Nights. Jessica's arc is perhaps the most sympathetic of the four characters when you understand it fully. She wasn't born into violence. She was someone with enormous talent and ambition who wanted nothing more than to be a Hollywood actress, and who found herself grinding out performances in a nightclub while men with power used her as entertainment rather than taking her seriously. A press photographer discovered an affair with a film producer she'd been using to climb the ladder and threatened to destroy her career with a blackmail scheme. Faced with the end of everything she'd worked toward, Jessica made the darkest possible choice. She lured the photographer to her and killed him. Graham brings a fascinating mix of warmth and cold steel to Jessica. There are moments where you hear genuine grief and self-awareness beneath the surface, an acknowledgement that she knows what she did and can't quite reconcile it with who she thought she was. Jessica is cautious with all three of the men she finds herself working with. She knows how men in Morgue City see women, and she's not giving anyone the benefit of the doubt without earning it. Neil McDonough as Jack Vincent. Detective Jack Vincent, the corrupt cop whose whole career was built on bending the law until it broke, is played by Neil McDonough, an actor whose face you likely know from Captain America, The First Avenger, Band of Brothers, and a string of television roles where he tends to play exactly the kind of cold, calculating authority figure that Jack embodies. Vincent is a fascinating character because, unlike the others, his corruption wasn't a single desperate act. It was a sustained lifestyle. He was a detective who used his badge as a weapon for personal gain, who turned the legal system into a tool for private enrichment. His murder of what's described as a drug dealer connected to his corrupt operations was part of a pattern, not an aberration. McDonough plays him with a menacing stillness that occasionally cracks into something almost charming. Jack thinks of himself as a realist, someone who understood how the world actually worked instead of how people pretended it worked. When he looks at the other three, he sees them through the lens of a detective, cataloguing their weaknesses and deciding how useful they are. He immediately offers alliances to multiple members of the group, because that's how he's wired. Everyone is either a tool or a threat. Robert Picardo as the Shadow Man. If Jeff Goldblum, Ron Perlman, Heather Graham, and Neil McDonough are the heart of the cast, Robert Picardo is the voice that frames all of it. The Shadow Man, the ancient cosmic horror who set everything in motion and watches the four sinners navigate his trap. Picardo is best known for playing the emergency medical hologram in Star Trek. Voyager, a role that gave him decades of experience delivering technically precise, emotionally resonant performances within a science fiction framework. As the Shadowman, he does something more subtle and more unsettling. He sounds reasonable, patient, almost kind. When the Shadowman tells the Four that only through him will they find redemption, you almost believe him. That's the key to the character's effectiveness. He isn't the snarling villain. He's the mentor, the guide, the figure who knows where you need to go and will walk you right off the edge while you're still thanking him for the directions. Picardo's performance makes every word sound like a gift being offered, which makes the betrayal, when the Shadowman finally drops the act and reveals that everything they've done has served his ends, hit with genuine impact. Nero's true sin. While all four characters are described as having committed murder, Nero Blackstone's specific crime is perhaps the most darkly ironic of the group. Nero was a stage illusionist, someone whose entire identity was built around making the impossible seem real, constructing elaborate spectacles designed to dazzle audiences. His wife had become a source of frustration to him, someone he described as always complaining, always critical, never satisfied with what he provided. Then, during a performance, during a trick, he killed her. The exact details are deliberately left somewhat murky, but the implication is that what should have been stage magic became something else. It wasn't premeditated in the traditional sense. It happened in the space between illusion and reality, the exact space Nero spent his whole life occupying. There's a layer of additional context that makes it darker still. In the months before the events of the map, the Shadow Man, disguised as Nero's wife, had been forging loan documents in Nero's name, plunging him into debt he had no idea about. The Shadow Man had been constructing Nero's downfall from multiple directions simultaneously, creating the circumstances that would make Nero's desperate act not just possible, but almost inevitable. The man who made his living making things disappear ended up making someone disappear for real. Floyd's championship belt and the promoter. Floyd Campbell's sin is rooted in the grinding, brutal economics of the boxing world. He was a talented fighter who never received the opportunities he deserved, and the opportunities he did receive were controlled by a promoter who benefited from keeping Floyd in a state of perpetual near success, always fighting but never quite reaching the championship that would have made him free. The championship belt he collects as his ritual item during the Easter egg isn't just an object, it's the thing he actually wanted. The belt he killed his promoter to obtain. The promoter had been rigging fights, taking kickbacks, making promises about title shots that he had no intention of keeping. When Floyd finally understood the full scope of how thoroughly he'd been cheated, the rage that had been building for years came out in the most permanent way possible. What makes Floyd's story compelling is that it's not so different from stories that actually happen in professional sports. Athletes used up by the system, discarded when their value is extracted, and driven to desperate acts by betrayal so thorough it leaves no other options visible. Floyd doesn't regret who he killed, but he carries the weight of it in every line Ron Perlman delivers. Jessica's blackmailer and the price of ambition. Jessica Rose's path to Morgue City started in a room that was supposed to be safe. She had worked out a plan, not a perfect plan, and definitely not a moral one, but a plan. She had been involved with a film producer who could give her the career opportunities that her talent alone hadn't been enough to unlock, in a world that didn't take women like her seriously. A press photographer discovered the affair and saw an opportunity. What the photographer didn't understand was that Jessica had already survived far worse things than exposure. She invited him over, and she made sure he wouldn't be talking to anyone. The ritual item she collects, the film producer's toupee, is almost deliberately absurd, which is Treyarch's way of making a dark observation about the people who have power over other people's dreams. The man who held Jessica's career in his hands is represented by an object that's both pitiable and ridiculous. That said, the cold mechanics of what Jessica did shouldn't be mistaken for a simple villain's origin story. She didn't enjoy it. She didn't plan it far in advance with methodical detachment. She was cornered, she was desperate, and she chose survival over principles. A choice that the Shadowman understood would mark her in exactly the way he needed. Jack's partner's badge and a cop's corruption. Jack Vincent's ritual item is his partner's police badge, and the fact that his sin involves sacrificing his own partner speaks to exactly how thoroughly corruption had permeated his entire professional existence. Jack had been running dirty operations for years, using his position to facilitate criminal activity, turning the machinery of law enforcement into a private enterprise. His partner either discovered what Jack was doing, or was being positioned to become a witness against him, or simply became an inconvenient variable in Jack's calculations. The badge is both the evidence of everything Jack built his identity on, and the symbol of the most complete betrayal he committed. A detective who turns the badge he was entrusted with into an instrument of corruption, and then uses that same badge's authority to eliminate the one person who might have held him accountable. It's a story about institutional rot told through a single object. Jack's dialogue throughout the map reflects his perspective without offering much remorse. He references the 4 Mob of the Dead characters in his lines: Sal, Billy, Finn, and Al, because those are the kinds of criminals Jack dealt with in Morgue City. He knows the underworld. He was part of it. The Mark of the Beast. When all 4 characters wake up in different corners of a zombie-infested Morgue City, the first thing each of them notices is the mark seared into their left hand. This symbol, the Apothecon Mark of the Beast, isn't just a branding, it's a mechanism. The Shadowman placed this mark on each of them deliberately, and it serves a functional purpose beyond simply identifying them as his targets for redemption theater. The mark is what allows the 4 to access beast mode, the transformation that lets them temporarily become conduits for Apothecon energy, grappling across buildings, electrocuting machinery, smashing through barriers that would otherwise be impassable. In the game's broader mythology, the beast transformation isn't a blessing. It's the curse the Shadowman is dangling in front of them as a leash. By branding them, he gave them the tools to navigate his trap, ensuring they'd survive long enough to do what he needed them to do. The mark connects each character's guild directly to their utility. They're marked because of their sins, and they're useful because of the mark, and by the time they understand the full extent of what's happened, they've already done most of the Shadowman's work for him. The Shadowman's disguise as Mr. Rapt. Before the Shadowman ever appeared as the shadowy purple-shrouded figure on the fire escape, he walked among Morgue City's population wearing a human face. He took the identity of a recently deceased man named Mr. Rapt. Using the dead man's appearance, his name, and his social connections to embed himself in Morgue City's fabric months before the events of the map began. As Mr. Rapt, the Shadowman made contact with each of the 4 characters' lives in careful, calculated ways. He arranged circumstances, created pressures, nudged situations toward the outcomes he needed. The reporter who arrives in Morgue City to write a piece about its nightlife scene was sent there specifically by Mr. Rapt. A detail you learn from the phone booth messages scattered around the map. The reporter calls in, leaves messages on phones throughout the city, and in those recordings you can hear someone slowly becoming aware that something is deeply wrong with Morgue City, that people have been acting strange since a meteor shower nobody would talk about, that the city feels like it's holding its breath. That meteor shower, element 115 arriving in dimension 63. The Shadow Man wearing a dead man's face set all of it in motion from the ground level. Nero's failing career. One of the richer details buried in Nero's background is the specific shape of his professional decline. He wasn't always a failing magician. He came from a wealthy family, received a lifetime of praise and privilege, and parlayed that into a genuinely successful career as an illusionist in Morgue City. But fame, as it turned out, had a shelfy life. His performances became stale. His audiences drifted to newer attractions. And then the bottom fell out of his reputation entirely when Magicians Weekly, an in-world publication that apparently wields enormous cultural power in 1940s Morgue City, named him Worst Magician of the Year. In a world where stage performers lived and died by reputation, that kind of public humiliation was career-ending. Nero's response was to double down on arrogance as a defense mechanism. If the world thought he was worthless, he would think the world was wrong. His character dynamic with the rest of the group reflects this. He consistently overestimates his own importance and knowledge, even when he's the least practically skilled person in the group. Floyd finds him insufferable. Jack finds him suspicious. Jessica tolerates him with visible effort. Only Nero seems genuinely proud of who he is, and the sadder element of his character is that he does, buried under all that arrogance, have something real. He's read about interdimensional convergences. He understands more about what's happening than he lets on. Nero Blackstone named after a real magician. The name Nero Blackstone isn't arbitrary. It's a direct reference to Harry Blackstone Sr., one of the most celebrated stage magicians of the early 20th century. A man who performed across America during the golden age of stage magic, known for large-scale theatrical illusions, dramatic showmanship, and the ability to command an audience completely. Harry Blackstone performed during roughly the same era that Morgue City is set in, making the reference feel deliberately embedded in the time period. By naming Nero after Blackstone, Treyarch gave the character a lineage, the implication that Nero aspired to the kind of legendary status that real performers like Blackstone achieved, and failed to reach it. The surname was even visible on posters and magazine covers in pre-release screenshots of the game, but was quietly removed from the final released version, with the reference surviving only in external promotional material and community documentation. It's a small, careful piece of world building that anchors the fictional illusionist to an actual tradition, making Morgue City's cultural landscape feel like it exists as a continuation of real-world history, rather than a fantasy entirely disconnected from it. How the four are gathered. The night everything falls apart begins, according to the game's timeline, on April 25th. All four characters are at the Black Lace Burlesque Club, watching Jessica Rose perform. This isn't coincidence. The Shadow Man, operating as Mr. Rapt, has been quietly steering each of them toward this specific location at this specific time. Nero was there because he was drawn to Jessica's performance, possibly romantically. Floyd was there, perhaps blowing off steam between fights. Jack was there in a professional capacity, or something resembling one. And Jessica was there because it was her show. She didn't choose to be gathered anywhere. She already was exactly where the Shadowman needed her to be. During her performance, all four of them lose consciousness simultaneously. They wake up alone, scattered in different parts of a city that is now abandoned and crawling with the undead. Each of them has the mark on their hand. Each of them has no memory of how they got where they are. And then the Shadowman's voice begins, offering guidance. offering redemption, offering the only apparent path through the nightmare they've found themselves inside. The gathering is elegant in its simplicity. He didn't need to abduct them. He just needed to arrange for them to be in one place at the same time and let the trap close around them naturally. Nero's books and interdimensional knowledge, hidden in Nero's Landing, the section of Easy Street that serves as his ritual area and personal space within the map, is a large collection of books. Among them, according to law documentation, are 2 volumes of the American People's Encyclopedia and, more significantly, a book that dealt with the concept of interdimensional convergences. The implication is deliberate and quietly disturbing. Nero, the failed magician, who everyone dismisses as a self-important blowhard, had actually been reading material that touched on exactly the kind of cosmic mechanics that the Shadow Man and the Apothecans operate within. He knew, in some theoretical way, that other dimensions existed and could intersect with his own. Whether the Shadowman specifically engineered this detail, whether Nero's curiosity about the occult and the cosmological was something cultivated from a distance, guided by subtle influences, is left open. But it gives Nero a dimension the other characters lack. Floyd knows how to fight. Jack knows how to survive. Jessica knows how to manipulate. Nero knows things he probably shouldn't, and isn't sure what to do with that knowledge now. That theory has become terrifyingly literal. The characters' dynamic and mutual distrust. From the moment the 4 survivors find each other in the alleyway, the group dynamic is built on suspicion rather than solidarity. None of them trust the others, and with good reason. All 4 are people who have demonstrated, fairly recently, that they're capable of serious violence when their interests are threatened. Jack immediately tries to form multiple separate alliances. He approaches Jessica. He watches Floyd. He keeps an eye on Nero. He's essentially trying to play all sides in a situation where he doesn't yet understand what the sides are. Jessica deflects his alliance offer initially, then reconsiders. And her reconsideration reads less like warmth and more like tactical repositioning. Floyd is the most direct about his feelings. He finds Nero irritating, Jack calculating, and makes no effort to pretend otherwise. Nero, meanwhile, tries to present himself as a natural leader and source of wisdom, and gets varying degrees of polite dismissal from everyone. What makes the dynamic work so well is that none of them are wrong to be suspicious of each other. They all have blood on their hands. They've all shown that when things get difficult, they make choices that hurt other people. The Shadowman understood this. 4 people with working moral compasses might have found a way to cooperate genuinely. 4 people who each secretly believe they're the protagonist of their own story, surrounded by obstacles. That's exactly what he needed. Jessica's Hollywood dreams. The specific framing of Jessica Rose's ambitions is worth sitting with for a moment. She isn't described simply as someone who wanted fame or money, though both were clearly part of the picture. She wanted to be in motion pictures. She wanted to act, to have her face on screens across the country, to be recognized for something beyond what audiences saw at the Black Lace Burlesque Club. In the young 1940s context of Morgue City, burlesque performance occupied a complicated cultural space. It was visible, it was popular, but it also carried social stigma that made moving from that world into legitimate film almost impossible without powerful connections. The film producer wasn't just a shortcut for Jessica. He represented the only plausible path from where she was to where she wanted to be. When the blackmailer threatened to expose the relationship, he wasn't just threatening to embarrass her. He was threatening to permanently close the door she'd spent years trying to force open. Her dialogue throughout the map occasionally surfaces this grief, the life she was trying to build, the version of herself she was trying to become, interrupted and rerouted by the worst decision she ever made. She doesn't receive the Hollywood ending she wanted. She receives Morgue City instead. Jack's references to the mob of the dead crew. Jack Vincent's dialogue includes a remarkable number of references to the 4 characters from the earlier Zombies map, Mob of the Dead: Salvatore Saldaluca, Billy Handsome, Finn O'Leary, and Albert Al Arlington. When picking up a grenade launcher, Jack can mention busting Sal's liquor joint. When he picks up the Magua heart, he calls it one of Billy Handsome's trophies. These aren't just flavor text. They're a narrative statement about the kind of detective Jack Vincent was and the world Morgue City occupied. He didn't just know of the Mob of the Dead crew in passing. He had operational knowledge of their activities. He busted their operations. He intersected with their criminal networks. Given that Mob of the Dead is also set in the same Dimension 63 timeline, Alcatraz in that same universe, Jack's references place him in a direct connective thread between 2 distinct Zombies narratives. He's a detective who policed the same underworld those 4 infamous criminals operated in. And given what we know about Jack's corruption, the relationship between the detective and the criminals he supposedly pursued was probably considerably more complicated than a simple adversarial one. Apocalypse averted is a lie. This might be the darkest, most quietly devastating secret in all of Shadows of Evil, and Treyarch confirms it in an official note hidden in the game's own lore documentation. The achievement you earn for completing the main Easter egg is called Apocalypse Averted. The full Easter egg sequence is named Apocalypse Averted. The 4 characters and the Keepers work together to trap the Shadow Man in the summoning key, and the cinematics suggest that they've done it. They've sealed the darkness, they've stopped the Apothecons, they've saved Morgue City and Dimension 63. Except they haven't. According to the official timeline, the Apothecons destroyed Dimension 63 the very next day after the events of the map take place, not in some distant future, the following morning, when Primus Richtofen arrives and steals the summoning key, an act that interrupts the Keeper's attempt to restore the dimension. He inadvertently removes the only mechanism that could have protected it. The dimension falls. Every living thing in it is destroyed. The 4 characters you spent the entire game guiding through rituals and boss fights and flag defense sequences are dead. Their sacrifice was real. Their victory was temporary. The universe you saved was already scheduled for demolition. The achievement name isn't triumphant. It's ironic. The ancient war of Agartha. Long before Morgue City existed, long before the 20th century, long before recorded human history, there was a war. The Keepers, beings of cosmic balance residing in Agartha, a dimension beyond the physical universe, fractured along ideological lines. One faction had been experimenting with the dark ether, the corrupting void energy that exists outside the boundaries of ordered reality, and those experiments changed them. They were seduced by the ether pyramid, a device of unimaginable power that could theoretically control reality itself. The idea of possessing that kind of control was more than the corrupted Keepers could resist. The faction that would eventually become the Apothecons went to war against their own kind, Keeper against Keeper, ancient beings who had maintained the universe in balance, suddenly trying to tear it apart. The non-corrupted Keepers won. The corrupted were defeated, stripped of their former forms by the sustained exposure to dark ether energy, and banished into the void. What emerged from that banishment were the Apothecons, no longer the elegant beings they once were, but tentacled, eldritch creatures of pure hunger and malice, their original natures visible only in the faintest traces of what they'd once been. The Shadowman, as the one who led that faction, carries more of his original identity than most. Enough to be dangerous, enough to remember exactly what he lost and to want it back. Element 115 as cosmic seeding, the element that drives the entire Call of Duty Zombies universe, the mysterious substance that reanimates the dead, powers wonder weapons, and drives human researchers to catastrophic experiments, didn't arrive by accident. It was placed. The Apothicons, operating from within the dark ether across cosmic timescales, deliberately seeded element 115 across multiple dimensions. They scattered it through meteor strikes, through geological formations, through the kinds of deep earth deposits that human scientists would eventually discover and misuse. The entire purpose was to trigger a predictable chain reaction. Humans find 115. Humans experiment with 115. Humans create zombie outbreaks, human weapons programs, interdimensional research that cracks the walls between realities. And then the Apothicons, who can't enter a dimension unless its barriers have been weakened, have an opening. Every major zombies map is, in some sense, the consequence of this seeding. Dereza, Moon, Origins, all of it can be traced back to the Apothicons putting their chess pieces in place across dimensions and centuries, then waiting for the board to arrange itself the way they needed. In Shadows of Evil, the 115 falling as a meteor shower over Morgue City is the most recent iteration of this ancient strategy, and the phone booth recordings of the reporter give you an eerily grounded perspective on what the beginning of cosmic contamination looks like at street level. The summoning key's role, the artifact at the center of everything in Shadows of Evil, the object you find in the back of a truck at the game's very beginning by entering beast mode and smashing a crate, is the summoning key. In your hands, it looks like an orb. But in the larger Zombies mythology, the summoning key is an artifact of extraordinary power, capable of gathering and containing souls, opening rifts between dimensions, and serving as the mechanism through which the Apothicons can exercise direct control over a dimension's fate. The four characters need the key to begin the rituals, placing it at each ritual altar, and using it in combination with their specific sacrificial items to complete the corrupted ceremonies the Shadowman has set up. What they don't understand until it's too late is that every time they use the key in a ritual, they're pouring more power into it, charging it, opening the Apothicon Rift Stone, making it capable of doing exactly what the Shadowman needs it to do. It's the most elegant possible trap. The survivors have no choice but to use the key if they want any chance of survival. And every use of the key is another step towards sealing their world's doom. After the Shadowman is captured within the key, it becomes the prison for the most dangerous being in the multiverse. Then Primus Richtofen takes it, and the prison travels with him. Morgue City in Dimension 63. The game's setting isn't just the familiar physical world of Call of Duty. It's Dimension 63, one of many parallel universes in the Zombies multiverse, each representing a different possible configuration of history and physics. Dimension 63 is specifically significant because it's also the dimension that housed Alcatraz in Mob of the Dead, the map set on the infamous island prison. This means that the organized crime underworld of Morgue City, the corrupt detective Jack Vincent, the burlesque clubs and boxing rings and canal districts, all of it exists in the same timeline as the mobsters and supernatural prison horrors of that earlier map. Jack Vincent making references to Sal DeLuca and Billy Handsome isn't just a cute Easter egg nod. It's confirmation that the moral rot at the center of Mob of the Dead and the moral rot at the center of Shadows of Evil are part of the same societal fabric. The dimension had problems long before the Apothicons came knocking. It was already full of corruption, violence, and people willing to do terrible things to each other. The Shadowman selected it carefully. He needed a dimension with enough guilt and darkness already present that finding 4 people willing to commit murder for their ambitions wouldn't take much effort at all. The Shadowman manipulated Richtofen through the Moon Pyramid. One of the most significant pieces of lore connecting Shadows of Evil to the broader Zombies universe is the revelation that the Shadowman had been reaching across dimensions long before Morgue City, doing exactly what he did to the 4 main characters, but on a different, slower scale, with a different target. When Ultimus Edward Richtofen, the mad German scientist who drove so much of the earlier Zombies storyline, first came into contact with the Moon Pyramid device as a test subject for Group 935's matter transference experiment, he heard voices, many voices, coming from inside the ether pyramid. Those voices drove him gradually insane, redirecting his ambitions, feeding his paranoia, filling his mind with visions of power and Agatha and control. Chief among those voices was the Shadowman. He had identified Richtofen as a useful tool long before the events of Black Ops 3, and spent years cultivating his madness like a gardener, tending a particularly dangerous plant. Richtofen's entire descent, the experiments on Samantha Maxis, the manipulation of global events toward the zombie apocalypse, the extraordinary things he did trying to reach Agatha, were all, at least partly, the Shadowman's work. Which means that when Richtofen arrives at the end of Shadows of Evil to take the summoning key, it's the culmination of something the Shadowman set in motion before Richtofen was even born. Richtofen's notes and future map coordinates, scattered around Morgue City in Shadows of Evil, are scrap papers and ciphers that, when combined, form drawings and notes in Richtofen's handwriting. Among these notes are 4 sets of coordinates. This detail seems small until you understand what those coordinates represent. They're geographic locations that correspond to the settings of the subsequent Black Ops 3 DLC Zombies maps. Lower Silesia, Hohenwerfen Castle, Pompeii Island, and Volgograd. Der Eisendrache is set at a castle in the Alps near Hohenwerfen. Zetsubu, Noshima, is set on a Pacific island corresponding roughly to Pompeii. Gorod Krovi is set in Stalingrad, Volgograd's former name during the Second World War. And the Giant, while technically a prologue map, connects to the broader storyline. These coordinates appear in Morgue City because Richtofen, in his dimension-traveling work, had already identified these sites as significant. His notes predate the player's experience of those maps. The game was telling you where you were going next before the DLC had been released, building an anticipatory roadmap into the environment itself for players who knew what to look for. The Apothicons sent Element 115 via Meteors. When the Shadows of Evil reporter calls Mr. Rapp to check in from Morgue City, one of the details she mentions in complete bewilderment is a recent meteor shower that fell over the city. She notes that everyone in Morgue City seemed oddly unbothered by it. No one wanted to talk about it. No one treated it as the significant event it clearly was. The meteor shower is Element 115 arriving in Dimension 63, delivered through the Apothicon standard methodology of cosmic seeding. The strange behavior of the Morgue City population, the sense that something is off, that the city is holding its breath, is the early stage consequence of 115 exposure before the full outbreak begins. The reporter is an outsider, someone without prior exposure who can still register that things aren't right because she's seeing the city with fresh eyes. The locals have normalized the strange because the strange has been incrementally introduced. The apothecan's strategy is always patient like this. You don't invade a dimension. You poison it slowly, wait for the population to acclimate to each new level of strangeness, and by the time the full horror arrives, nobody has the mental framework to respond effectively anymore. The keepers appear during the Easter egg. At multiple points during the main Easter egg, particularly during the ritual completion sequences and the final confrontation with the Shadow Man, you encounter the keepers themselves, not as enemies, but as something more complicated. They appear as spirit figures, ghost-like presences that the characters interact with during the flag defense sections. Each ghost corresponds to one of the 4 ritual areas, and the characters must bring a specific flag to each ghost to progress through the story. The keepers in Shadows of Evil exist in a position of ambiguity. They're the ancient beings who banished the apothecans, who maintain cosmic order, who represent the benevolent side of the conflict that the Shadow Man fell away from. But they're also beings operating on a completely different scale of concern than the 4 survivors. Their interest in Nero, Floyd, Jessica, and Jack is instrumental. The 4 humans are useful tools for containing the Shadow Man, in much the way the Shadow Man used them as useful tools for opening the portal. The difference is that the keepers are working towards something that genuinely benefits everyone, rather than something catastrophically destructive. It's still not exactly a relationship of equals. The keepers will save the world through the humans. They won't necessarily save the humans. Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man were friends. In later Black Ops 3 maps, particularly Revelations, the character of Dr. Monty, the benevolent and eccentric keeper of the multiverse, references the Shadow Man in a way that reveals something profound about both characters. Monty describes knowing the Shadow Man way back, someone who was once the sweetest, most charming individual you could ever wish to meet. Someone funny, someone Monty genuinely liked, his best friend. The Shadow Man wasn't born evil. He wasn't created as an adversary or programmed with malice as a default setting. He was once someone capable of friendship, of humor, of genuine connection. The dark ether changed all of that, corrupting not just his physical form, but his values and motivations at the most fundamental level. The tragedy buried in Monty's words is that the monster who has been spreading zombie outbreaks across the multiverse, who manipulated Richthofen into madness, who engineered the destruction of the entire dimensions, that being was once loved by someone, once had a friend who still mourns what was lost. It gives the Shadow Man a depth that pure villains rarely possess, a sense that the evil isn't original but acquired, that something was taken from him at the same time he was becoming dangerous. The apothecon's apothecon language, one of the smallest but most fascinating pieces of world building in Shadows of Evil, is the apothecon language woven throughout the map's text, names, and terminology. The apothecon servant, the wonder weapon, has different names for each of the 4 players: Mar Astagua, Narulagua, Komoroth, and Lor Zarozol. When upgraded, it becomes the Abguath, or in Revelations, the Estula Astoth, which translates in the apothecon language to envy all. The upgraded Estumoth translates roughly to suffering/sin change. The Magua enemy is named Mirgamalit in the Keeper language. The apothecon Riftstone is named in apothecon. Treyarch created an actual constructed language for these ancient cosmic beings, with consistent internal logic and translatable vocabulary, and then scattered it across the map in ways that only careful players and dedicated community researchers would ever uncover. The language functions as evidence of the Apothecon's coherence as a civilization, not just as monsters. They have names for things. They have grammar. They built something that lasted long enough to develop linguistic traditions. Whatever they were before the Dark Ether took them was clearly complex and ancient. The Noir Mode secret, Morgue City in Shadows of Evil, is already soaked in the visual language of 1940s film noir. The rain-slicked streets, the neon signs bleeding color into the darkness, the deep shadows pooling in doorways, the jazz echoing from clubs. But if you want to push that aesthetic even further, there's a hidden switch that transforms the entire map into a classic black and white experience. Behind the boxing ring in the waterfront district, there's a picture frame on the wall. Shoot it, and then interact with it. The entire map desaturates, every color drains away, leaving nothing but the stark, high-contrast monochrome of classic noir cinema. Playing in noir mode removes none of the gameplay functionality, but adds an extraordinary atmospheric layer to the experience. Suddenly, Morgue City looks like a Raymond Chandler novel rendered in a video game engine, like you're playing inside a film that was shot during the golden age of Hollywood darkness. Enemies that were already unsettling become genuinely eerie in silhouette. The Shadow Man on the fire escape looks like something out of a German expressionist horror film. It's a purely cosmetic secret, the kind of hidden touch that serves no purpose except to reward players who explore thoroughly and love the genre the map is paying tribute to. The Richthofen zombie jump scare, hidden in the textures of Shadows of Evil, is one of the most startling optional moments in the map's experience. A direct jump scare that requires specific setup and deliberate action to trigger. After completing the rituals, not during early play, but after that specific milestone has been reached, take out a sniper rifle and zoom in on the buildings near the docks where the boxing gym is located. Under the right conditions, peering through the magnification of a scope into the distant architecture of the city, a picture of Ultimus Edward Richthofen appears. But it's not a normal portrait of the German scientist. It's a zombified version of Richthofen, posed in the exact position he appears in during the intro cutscene of the Giant, the other zombies map included with Black Ops 3. And it screams at you. The same image, it turns out, appears inside the Giant when players teleport, meaning the jump scare isn't just a standalone Easter egg, but a cross-map visual callback, a tiny thread connecting the two maps that are bundled together in Black Ops 3. It's the kind of detail that makes a map feel lived in by designers who hid things because they wanted the most curious players to be surprised, not because they expected anyone to find it quickly. The round skip secret, at the very beginning of a match in Shadows of Evil, in those early moments when players are orienting themselves in the starting alley, checking their weapons, getting their bearings. There is a figure visible in the staircase that leads up toward Nero Blackston's ritual room. That figure is the Shadowman himself, lingering in the shadows at the top of the stairs like something out of a dream you don't want to follow into. And if all players shoot him simultaneously at this point, before the zombies have gotten serious, before the pressure of the game has built into something unstoppable, you receive an unexpected reward. Shooting the Shadow Man at the start allows you to skip forward to round 5 for 1,000 points, to round 10 for 4,000 points, and all the way to round 15 for 11,000 points. It's a power-up with a cost, because each time you skip, You arrive at whatever round number you chose and immediately face that round's full complement of zombies. Jump to round 15 without preparation, and you're going to have a very difficult next few minutes. But the points are real, the resources valuable, and the shortcut gives players with solid high round strategies a running start. It's also a small piece of storytelling. The Shadowman offers you shortcuts, makes things seem easier, gives you what looks like advantage. That's exactly what he does to the main characters, and it works on players the same way. The Icarus plane flies. During the Easter egg, during the main Easter egg, specifically during the final stages of the beginning of the end sequence. If you're paying attention to the skies above Morgue City, rather than the immediate chaos unfolding around you, you'll catch something remarkable. The Icarus, the prototype plane that the 4 prisoners of Mob of the Dead spent their purgatorial existence obsessively constructing and never quite escaping on, can be seen flying overhead. This detail exists at the intersection of 2 separate zombies narratives that both take place in Dimension 63. The Alcatraz pocket dimension of Mob of the Dead operates in the same reality as Morgue City. The prisoner's plane, cycling through its eternal attempt at escape across the timeless prison purgatory, becomes visible from the streets of Morgue City at the moment when the dimensional barriers are at their most fragile, when the apothecans are pushing through, when the keepers are fighting back, when the fabric of Dimension 63 is stressed to its limits. The plane isn't just a cameo or a reference. It's confirmation that 2 of the most distinctive settings in Zombies lore share a sky. The Alcatraz map on the subway wall. In the underground subway station, the area that connects the 3 main districts through the rift portals and houses the Widow's Wineperk machine. If you look at the walls, you'll find a map of Alcatraz, the iconic island prison from Mob of the Dead, rendered as a navigational diagram, hanging in the transit system of a city set years before those events. It functions partly as a continuity reference, confirmation that Alcatraz exists in Dimension 63 and that people in Morgue City know of it, perhaps ride past it in their mental geography. But it also functions as a statement about the kind of darkness that pervades this dimension. The subway exists underground, beneath the surface of the city, where the corrupt detective and the criminal enterprises operate. And on the wall of that underground, there's a map to the prison that represents the endpoint of a different kind of corruption, a different set of people who chose violence and found themselves in a supernatural trap they couldn't escape. The map is a memento mori, a reminder that in Dimension 63, the wages of sin have very specific destinations. Origin's excavation map near the rift door. In the waterfront area, near the rift door that connects to the underground, there's a table where an excavation site map can be found. Specifically, the site from Origins, the earlier Zombies map set in World War I era France, where element 115 was first discovered by human researchers. This detail deepens the timeline considerably. Origins established that 115 could be found in ancient deposits in the French countryside, and that military research groups had been extracting it since at least the First World War. The fact that a map of that same excavation site exists in a waterfront office in 1940s, Morgue City, suggests active academic or intelligence interest in 115 research within Dimension 63. Someone in Morgue City knew about the excavations. Someone was tracking them, filing them away in an office that connected to the underground gateway. The table also contains a stuffed monkey, which is one of those details that might be pure set dressing, or might be a deeper callback to the monkey bombs that have been a staple of Zombies equipment since the earliest maps. Treyarch layers their maps with multiple overlapping registers of meaning, and the question of which details are intentional versus coincidental is part of what makes exploring them so rewarding. Sal DeLuca's black suit Easter egg. Near the door that separates the junction from the spawn area in Shadows of Evil, there's an open window. Through that window, if you look carefully into the building interior, you'll see a black suit hanging there with a tag attached. This is a reference to Salvatore Sal DeLuca, one of the 4 main characters from Mob of the Dead. To interact with the reference, you need to throw a grenade at the suit in a very specific way. The grenade needs to make contact with the suit at the exact moment it explodes. The Widow's wine grenades work particularly well for this because of how they behave. If you pull it off successfully, the tag detaches from the suit and lands in the playable area of the map. Pick it up, and you'll find it's signed with Sal's name. Interacting with it gives you 500 points. It's a tiny economic reward wrapped inside a tribute. Sal DeLuca was a mob boss, a man of a certain period-specific elegance. The kind of criminal who wore good suits and kept up appearances while running operations that cost other people their lives. Finding his suit in Morgue City, just as you're running from a different flavor of darkness, is a quietly melancholy connection. The cinema's November 6th date, tucked into the environmental details of Shadows of Evil, the kind of thing you'd notice while sheltering from a wave of zombies rather than actively hunting for Easter eggs, is a cinema marquee advertising upcoming shows. One of those shows is listed as appearing on November 6th. That's the release date of Call of Duty Black Ops 3. Treyarch slipped the game's own release date into the world of the game, embedding the real calendar into a fictional 1940s setting in a way that only players who actually looked at in-world text would ever catch. It's the kind of self-referential moment that game developers have been hiding in their work since the medium existed. A wink from the creators to the players, an acknowledgement that the people who built this world are aware you're playing it. The cinema itself is a natural fit for the noir setting of Morgue City, and the show listings that appear on its boards include other callbacks, but none so precisely personal as November 6th. The people who made Shadows of Evil hid their launch date in the fabric of the fiction they were creating, and that small detail makes the world feel more human. Escape from the Tomb in the theatre. One of the shows listed in the Morgue City Cinema is titled Escape from the Tomb. This is a direct reference to Mob of the Dead, where the same poster appears as part of a Golden Sport Quest Easter egg. The title is in-universe marketing for a horror spectacle, which fits perfectly in a 1940s entertainment context. But the callback runs deep. Escape from the Tomb describes the core loop of Mob of the Dead. 4 prisoners trapped in Alcatraz by supernatural forces, endlessly trying to escape a prison that loops them back to the beginning whenever they come close to succeeding. By placing this title in Morgue City's cinema, Treyarch is making a statement about the shared thematic DNA of both maps. Both are stories about people who committed terrible acts being imprisoned in supernatural conditions and given the illusion of redemption while actually serving someone else's agenda. The 4 prisoners of Mob of the Dead and the 4 sinners of Shadows of Evil are in parallel situations separated by geography and the circumstances of their trapping. The cinema poster is a mirror held up between them. The Snakeskin Boots musical Easter egg. Like every major Zombies map, Shadows of Evil contains hidden musical Easter eggs. Specific sequences of interactions that trigger full songs playing across the map. The first of these is a track called Snakeskin Boots, performed by a band called Snakeskin. specifically boots on a Saturday night. To activate it, you need to find 3 small, wooden speaker devices hidden around the map. The first is in the boxing gym in the waterfront district, up the stairs past the ring, in a small observation office. The second is on a bench in the Footlight District tram station. The third is in the Ruby Rabbit Bar in the Canal District. The activation sequence is specific. You need to hold the interact button while aiming at one radio twice, then single interactions with the other 2. The instrumental version of the track plays when done correctly. Snakeskin Boots is a genre-appropriate piece of writing, the kind of jazz-inflected track that belongs in the sonic landscape of 1940s Morgue City. Finding it isn't just a reward for exploring. It's a shift in the atmosphere of the entire map, a musical statement about the world you're surviving inside. Cold Hard Cash, second musical Easter egg. The second musical Easter egg in Shadows of Evil activates a song called Cold Hard Cash from the Black Ops 3 official soundtrack, performed by Jack Wall with Antonia Bennett. Unlike the speaker-based activation of the first song, this one requires you to find and assemble 3 parts of a broken microphone scattered across the map. The microphone stand is in Nero's area in the spawn, positioned between a circular knife-throwing target and a circular saw, which is its own interesting detail, the tools of a magician and the tools of actual violence sharing a space. The microphone wire is found at the far end of the Canal District, under the staircase opposite the wooden boat. The microphone itself is in the underground subway area, on the 2nd floor near a bench beside a portal. Once all 3 pieces are collected, you take them to the Black Lace Burlesque stage in the Footlight District and interact with the assembled microphone on stage. The song begins, standing in a zombie-infested 1940s nightclub with a jazz piece filling the air, surrounded by apothecon corruption and the lingering ghosts of bad decisions. It's one of the most atmospheric moments the map is capable of generating. Free mega gobblegum via the lion statues. One of the more rewarding side Easter eggs in Shadows of Evil, and one that requires solid map knowledge to execute, is the sequence that grants every player a free mega gobblegum without spending anything from their pack. To attempt it, you first need the Widow's Wine perk from the underground, and you need the Pack-a-Punch room to already be accessible. Up the Beast Mode stairs at the front of the Canal District, there's a room that contains 4 lion statue heads mounted on the walls. Each lion has an open mouth. Each player needs to throw a Widow's Wine grenade precisely into one of those mouths. The grenades are sticky by nature, which helps with precision, but the angles require some finesse. When done correctly, a lion roars in confirmation, and a small grey gobblegum ball appears in one of the mouths for each player to collect. Take those balls to the ice cream shop in the junction between Stamin' Up and the Footlight District door, and place them on the plate in the window. Complete 1 full round, return, and the plain white gobble gum has grown larger and gained its full power. The game's lore-adjacent reasoning for this, such as it is, involves the imagery of feeding something through a specific ritual to transform it, which echoes the mechanics of the pods, the swords, and the broader theme of cultivation and sacrifice that runs through the entire map. The trip mine upgrade and the donut explosion, hidden in Shadows of Evil's side. Easter egg collection is one of the most tonally bizarre secrets in the map, and given the competition, that's saying something. There are 2 different food cart types scattered around Morgue City: Devilo Donuts carts and Holly's cream cake carts. By placing a trip mine next to 3 of one type, killing a zombie in the explosion while the mine is positioned near 3 Holly's cream cake cards. And if done correctly, you'll hear Samantha Max's laugh in confirmation. The trip mines are now upgraded into donut mines, dealing higher damage and covering a greater blast radius. The visual is exactly what it sounds like. A donut-shaped explosion fills the air when they detonate. It's Treyarch acknowledging that horror and absurdist humor can coexist in the same space, that a map built around cosmic horror and ancient sin doesn't need to take itself seriously at every single moment. The laugh from Samantha, the girl who was trapped in a hell of her own, whose fate was tied to the broader zombies mythology in deeply dark ways, is an incongruous burst of delight in the middle of a nightmare. It's a reminder that some secrets in Shadows of Evil were hidden, not to reveal lore, but simply to reward players with something delightfully strange. The Lil Arnie upgrade and the dancing frog. The Lil Arnie, the small, round tactical equipment that replaces monkey bombs in Shadows of Evil, luring enemies toward it before detonating, has its own upgrade path hidden in the map. The upgrade process involves a multi-step sequence ending with a small Apothicon creature dancing with 4 gate worms. Treyarch's note on this moment includes an in-text acknowledgement that the dancing Apothicon with gate worms is a reference to One Froggy Evening, the classic 1955 Warner Brothers cartoon, featuring a tap-dancing frog that only performs for its owner and refuses to perform for anyone else. It's an absurdist callback, a piece of early animation history embedded in a Lovecraftian horror game about cosmic evil, chosen specifically because a dancing creature that refuses to perform on command maps entertainingly onto the strange, rule-bound behavior of the Apothicon entities. The upgrade makes the Lil Arnie more powerful and gives it greater range, but the image of a tiny tentacled horror doing a little dance alongside 4 magical worms while jazz plays in the background is one of those moments of pure tonal dissonance that makes Shadows of Evil feel unlike anything else in the franchise. The Rocket Shield upgrade. The Rocket Shield, Shadows of Evil's unique variant of the buildable zombie shield, can be upgraded into something more powerful called the Goddard apparatus. The base shield already functions as a defensive item that can be thrown to launch zombies into the air, which is both practical and satisfying. But to upgrade it, you need to accomplish something specific. Use the shield's charging power to ram into a horde of at least 10 zombies at once, and do so successfully 12 times in a row. Each successful run triggers a bowling pin strike sound effect, which is thematically appropriate and also functions as audio confirmation that you're making progress. If you fail to hit at least 10 zombies during a charge, the counter resets. If the shield breaks during the sequence, it doesn't automatically reset the counter, provided you don't fail a charge attempt between rebuilding it. The Goddard apparatus can absorb more hits than the base shield and holds additional charges. 4 instead of 3. It's a piece of equipment that rewards aggressive play, pushing players toward running into large groups rather than playing conservatively, which reinforces the broader design philosophy of Shadows of Evil's mob management. The perk bottle color indicator. In the junction area, the central hub where all 3 main districts connect via doorways, there's a small, easily missed detail that serves as a significant practical tool once you understand it. On the floor, near the doors, leading to the waterfront, footlight, and canal districts, there's a broken perk bottle lying in a pool of spilled liquid. That liquid is colored, and the color tells you exactly where the randomized perks have spawned for your current game. Red means Juggernog has appeared waterfront district. Green means Speed Cola is in the Canal District. Yellow means Double Tap Root Beer 2 is in the Footlight District. The colours rotate, and the bottle reflects which district received which perk when the game generated the layout. 3 of the 7 perks, Juggernog, Speed Cola, and Double Tap, shift their spawn locations from game to game, which can make early round perk hunting inefficient without this indicator. The other perks, Mule Kick, Widow's Wine, Stamina Up, and Quick Revive, always appear in the same locations. Knowing about the bottle means every second spent on perk acquisition is a second spent efficiently, rather than wandering through 3 districts hoping to stumble onto what you need. The death machine spawns only after Quick Revive. Among the power-up behaviors that Shadows of Evil uses to guide player decision-making in subtle ways, one of the most specific is tied to the death machine. The minigun temporary power-up that provides a window of overwhelming firepower. On this map, the death machine will only spawn as a drop power-up if at least one player on the team has already purchased Quick Revive. It won't appear before that condition is met, regardless of how many zombies you kill or how many rounds pass. This is a design nudge towards survivability. Quick Revive is the perk that lets downed players revive themselves in solo, or revive teammates faster in co-op, and by gating the death machine behind it, the map is strongly encouraging players to prioritize keeping each other alive before accessing the most offense-oriented power-up in the game. It's the kind of contextual mechanic that doesn't announce itself. Players discover it through pattern recognition, noticing that the death machine never seems to drop, then experimenting with perk orders until the correlation becomes clear. Beast Mode. The map's unique mechanic. Beast Mode is the mechanical heart of Shadows of Evil, the feature that makes it play differently from every other Zombies map before it. When a player interacts with one of the purple-lit stone basins scattered around the map, they briefly transform into something else. A conduit for Apothicon energy, taller and more powerful, crackling with supernatural electricity. In Beast Mode, you can grapple to high points on buildings using a hook. You can electrocute power junction panels to activate perk machines, open doors, and power systems that require energy. You can smash through barriers and crates that resist human-scale force. You're invincible to zombie attacks for the duration. You move faster. You can revive downed teammates at significantly increased speed. The transformation lasts 25 seconds. When it ends, you're returned to the location of the basin you started from. The mechanic is the direct equivalent of the Afterlife mode from Mob of the Dead, another Zombies map where players could briefly enter an electrified ghost state to interact with powered systems. In the lore context, the transformation is the mark of the beast at work. The Apothicon branding on the character's hands feeding energy into them, allowing them to temporarily operate as Apothicon conduits. Its corruption as gameplay tool. The Apothicon sword and the train symbol method. Obtaining the Apothicon sword, one of the most powerful melee weapons in the map, and a key component of the main Easter egg, requires a process that begins with the tram system. Before you can work on the sword, you need to ride the train and look out the window at 3 specific red symbols that appear on the walls of the track tunnel during transit. These symbols are unique to each game instance and change between matches, which means there's no fixed guide to symbol A is on the left wall, symbol B is on the right wall. You have to actually observe them during your specific run. Once you've memorized or noted down all 3 symbols, you enter the rift area in the underground and use Beast Mode to find matching red symbols on the wall of a specific chamber. Zapping the correct matching symbols opens a hidden door behind which lies the arch ovum, the egg. From there, you carry the egg to each of the 4 octopus statues scattered around the map. Insert it, and kill zombies nearby until each statue has consumed enough souls. Return the charged egg to the sword chamber, and the Apothicon sword is yours. A blade wreathed in Apothicon energy that deals extraordinary melee damage and serves as one of the primary tools for the later stages of the Easter egg. The upgraded Apothicon sword ritual. Owning the basic Apothicon sword is only the beginning. To access the fully upgraded version, which is needed for the complete Apocalypse Averted Easter egg, each player must undergo the Arch Ovum ritual. After returning to the ghost figure at your specific character's ritual area, you receive the Arch Ovum again. You then carry it to each of the 4 districts, Canal, Waterfront, Footlight, and the Junction area, and place it on the ground at specific locations marked by glowing red circles. At each placement, a Magua spawns specifically for you, and you have to kill it. 4 locations, 4 Maguas, with the additional complication that other enemies continue spawning during this process. Once all 4 are defeated and the egg's ritual is complete, you return to the Ghost Keeper and receive the Reborn Keeper sword. The upgraded version, significantly more powerful than the base weapon, with a visual design that reflects its Keeper origins rather than its Apothicon components. This weapon is not permanent. During the final phase of the Easter egg, when the Keepers deploy their power against the Shadowmen, each player's reborn sword is temporarily removed from their inventory, but by then, its purpose has been served. The cipher messages and their key. Scattered around Morgue City are 5 hidden cipher messages, along with 1 scrap paper. These aren't obvious pieces of readable text. They're encoded, requiring knowledge of the cipher key to decode. That key is the phrase, "Only the cursed survive," a recurring motif in the map's thematic framework. With that phrase as the cipher key, the messages unlock into fragments of something that sounds like Apothicon instruction or observation. 1 decodes to, "The elders will continue to cede space and time. I must lead them to the place they cannot see." Another reads, "Although they have discovered the way Primis will fail." These messages exist across multiple layers of awareness simultaneously. To the characters in the game, they're invisible, part of the fabric of a city that has been infiltrated by Apothicon influence. To players, they're a puzzle requiring active work to decode. To the broader Zombies community, they were among the first pieces of evidence that Black Ops 3's Zombies storyline was building towards something larger and more coherent than individual map plots. That Primis, the team of Zombies characters being assembled through the DLC maps, had a destiny that was being observed and discussed at cosmic scale before they even knew they existed as a group. The 12 phone booth messages spread across Morgue City are 12 telephone booths, and each one can be activated to play a recorded message that gradually builds a picture of what was happening in the city before the outbreak. Most of these messages come from the reporter that the Shadow Man, in his Mr. Rap disguise, sent to Morgue City to write a piece about the nightlife scene. Her messages are a masterclass in slow building dread. Early calls are cheerful, observational, a journalist noting interesting details about an unfamiliar city. Then the tone shifts. She mentions the meteor shower that nobody wanted to discuss. She notes that people in Morgue City are behaving strangely, that conversations stop when she approaches, that something is off in a way she can't quite articulate. Later, messages grow more frightened. Some of the booths only become active after the players have completed the rituals, revealing new information that contextualizes what the characters have just done. Some of the messages are addressed directly to Mr. Rapt, meaning you're reading the Shadowman's correspondence. The reporter is an innocent, someone caught at the edges of a trap she didn't know existed, documenting the early stages of an apocalypse with the confused professional diligence of someone who doesn't yet understand what she's witnessing. The fumigator and harvest pods. One of Shadows of Evil's most distinctive environmental systems is the network of harvest pods, plant-like organic growths that appear throughout the map, starting small and green and gradually maturing through red to purple over the course of multiple rounds. These pods can only be opened using a fumigator tool, which spawns once per district and must be found and picked up before it can be used. The pod tier at the time of opening determines what you receive. Yellow pods give weak rewards, red pods provide mid-tier items, and purple pods, left to mature for several rounds, yield the best possible drops, including the Magua tentacle needed to build the Apothecan's Servant. The risk/reward calculation built into this system is simple but meaningful. Opening a pod early guarantees something usable, but potentially mediocre. Waiting for it to mature to full purple improves your odds of getting something game-changing, but means leaving the pod in the map while rounds pass, fighting around it, hoping you remember where it is and that it doesn't get incidentally destroyed. The pod system connects thematically to the Apothecan's presence in Morgue City, the organic, growing biological corruption spreading through the city's environment, offering temptation to those willing to reach into its darkness. The Magua head wearable, one of the most intricately hidden collectible items in Shadows of Evil, is the Magua head, a wearable that, once equipped, provides resistance to the Magua's devastating slam attack. Without it, a Magua landing its slam on a player triggers an instant down. With it, you survive. But obtaining it is genuinely complex. First, 6 Maguas must be killed during a single match, a total shared among all players in co-op, not an individual requirement per player. Since Magua spawns are relatively infrequent except during specific Easter egg steps, planning around guaranteed Magua sources is essential. Second, during your current match, you need to shoot 6 Magua hearts that are embedded in the architecture of buildings visible only from the tram. 2 are in each of the 3 districts: waterfront, footlight, and canal. You have a maximum of 2 tram rides to hit all 6. Miss them on both passes, and all 6 hearts reset, forcing you to wait for the next opportunity. When all 6 have been shot correctly, a Magua death sound confirms completion. Then the actual head spawns somewhere in the map, invisible except for a faint, intermittent white light and pickup icon, and each player who needs it must find and collect their own. It's one of the most layered collectible systems in Zombies history, requiring spatial awareness, tram timing, and persistent attention across a full match. The VMP wall buy cut from the game. During development of Shadows of Evil, a VMP submachine gun wall purchase was planned for a location in the waterfront district, at the top of one of the metal staircases that players activate during beast mode. For reasons that were never publicly explained, this wall buy was cut from the final released version of the game. However, on the PC version of Black Ops 3, players who use the no-clip console command to pass through walls can reach the location and find the VMP still there, purchasable from within the out-of-bounds area. The weapon works normally in gameplay once obtained through this method. It's a fascinating archaeological remnant, a piece of content that was designed, implemented, and then removed from the accessible game without being fully cleaned from the game files. Finding it requires exploiting the specific freedoms of PC modding to reach a space the developers sealed off. And what you discover when you get there is a functional wall weapon that suggests Treyarch had a more densely furnished waterfront district in mind before the final pass of content decisions trimmed it back. The summoning key orb is visually deceptive. When you first find the summoning key at the start of Shadows of Evil, smashing the crate on the truck in beast mode and picking up the glowing orb, nothing about its visual presentation suggests the scale of what it is. It's small. It pulses softly within a light. It fits in a hand. For something that is capable of containing the Shadowman, one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse, a corrupted keeper who survived being banished to the dark ether for an immeasurable span of time. It is remarkably unassuming. That disproportion between appearance and significance is thematically coherent with everything else in Morgue City. The Shadowman looks like a man in shadows. The mark of the beast looks like a small scar on a hand. The rituals look like local occult ceremonies. Everything in the trap is smaller seeming than it actually is, because the Shadowman needs the four sinners to underestimate what they're dealing with until it's too late to stop. The orb fits in a pocket. The horror doesn't. The junction is the map's nerve center. The central junction area. The plaza where all three districts meet, where the crane stands, where the broken perk bottle's color tells you which district received which perk, is functionally the most important non-combat space in Morgue City. It contains a gobblegum machine, one of the four civil Protector emergency response panels, the starting alley access point, and the crane mechanism used to retrieve Nero's lawyer's pen. Traffic through the junction is unavoidable. Any route between districts passes through it, meaning the junction sees more player footfall than any other area in the map. Experienced players develop an instinctive relationship with the junction's geometry, knowing where to stand to cover multiple approach vectors, which doorways lead, where, how to cross it quickly under pressure. The broken perk bottle on the floor near the district doors is one of the most genuinely useful small details in the map, a communication system from the map's architecture to the player that says, without words, where to find what you need. The junction reads the map for you, if you read the junction. The Canal District's aquatic architecture. The Canal District lives up to its name. Water runs through the lower levels. Boat docks line the periphery, and the visual geography emphasizes horizontal movement along water-level passages connected to elevated platforms above. It's the most vertically complex of the three districts, with multiple accessible layers connected by stairs, beast mode grapple points, and the tram station positioned at a level that requires navigation to reach. The Canal District is also where the rift portal closest to the Pack-a-Punch area is located. Drop down into the water and approach the beast mode breakable door, making it functionally the primary entry point to the underground for most players who aren't coming from specific ritual directions. The architecture creates specific fighting conditions that differ from Footlight and Waterfront. Long sight lines in some areas, close quarters corners in others, the constant potential for being cornered near water with limited escape routes. Morgue City as a whole feels like a city that developed organically rather than being designed as a combat space. And the Canal District is where that organic complexity is most physically legible. The Widow's Wine Perk Machine visual design. The perk machine for Widow's Wine in the Rift area follows the visual language established for all Black Ops 3 perk machines. Each one has a design that communicates its function and fits the map's aesthetic simultaneously. The Widow's Wine machine features spider web imagery consistent with the perk's effect, a color palette that leans into the organic darkness of the Rift environment, and a label that is visually identifiable from across the underground space. Because the rift has its own distinct architectural character, more alien, more biological, more oppressive than the surface districts, the perk machines placed there feel like they belong to a different ecosystem than the ones above. They're not Morgue City utilities that were adapted to the underground. They were placed there for reasons that connect to the apothecan's influence on the space, functioning objects in a dimensional pocket that operates by different rules. The Widow's wine machine looks like something that grew there, like the harvest pods, like the organic rift walls, like the tentacle that grabs your weapon for pack-a-punch. The machine feels alive in a way that surface perk machines don't. The map is chronologically the third in the dimension, 63 timeline, while Shadows of Evil is the 18th Zombies map, to appear in the franchise by release order within the narrative chronology of the Dimension 63 timeline. It's the third event, following Mob of the Dead and the Civil War era events that preceded it. This chronological positioning means that when you're in Morgue City, you're in a world that already has Alcatraz's horrific purgatorial pocket dimension operating somewhere off the coast. The organized crime structure that Jack Vincent policed already includes the Mob of the Dead crew's activities in some form. The social fabric of Dimension 63 already carries the scars of supernatural contamination that began before Morgue City's 1940s setting. The apothecan's seeding didn't start with the meteor shower. It started earlier, contaminating a dimension with 115 deposits, encouraging specific patterns of human violence and moral corruption, waiting for the right configuration of guilt-ridden individuals to complete their arrangements. Morgue City represents the apex of that patient preparation, the moment when all the conditions they needed were finally in place. The Black Lace Burlesque is where it all began. The specific venue where all four characters lose consciousness, Jessica's workplace, the Black Lace Burlesque, is the physical center of the Shadowman's trap, in a way that goes beyond its narrative role as gathering point. It's the place where ambition, performance, desperation, and guilt all converge under one roof every night. A performer who killed to protect her career. A fighter who sat at the back of the room between fights. A corrupt detective attending for reasons he'd describe as professional. And a failing illusionist drawn by the spectacle of someone performing better than he ever could. In another city, in another version of these four lives, they might never have shared the same room. The Shadow Man ensured they did. He needed a space where the specific qualities of four different kinds of guilt could occupy the same darkness simultaneously, and the burlesque theater, where performance and reality blur, where what people pretend to be and what they actually are exist in close proximity, was the perfect location for a being who built his entire scheme on the gap between appearance and truth. The Insanity Elemental killed from distance. The Insanity Elemental, the rolling explosive sphere of apothecan energy, has a practical combat rule that experienced players learn quickly. Kill it from distance. The Insanity Elemental's death produces a burst that damages nearby players, meaning players who close the distance to fight it efficiently are also putting themselves in the kill radius of its demise. The optimal engagement is entirely ranged, treating it less like a regular zombie and more like a demonic grenade rolling toward you that you need to detonate before it reaches its target. This behavior, combined with the elemental's speed and the frequency with which they appear during their designated rounds, creates a specific kind of chaos that forces players to constantly manage both their horizontal positioning relative to the threat and their vertical awareness, since Insanity Elementals can roll over uneven terrain, and corner around obstacles in ways that regular zombies don't. The name Insanity Elemental implies something that doesn't behave predictably, and the rolling, chaotic movement pattern fulfills that promise every time they spawn. The ritual items cannot be carried simultaneously by multiple players. Each ritual item, Nero's lawyer's pen, Floyd's championship belt, Jessica's film producer's toupee, and Jack's partner's badge, can be collected once per match and belongs to the game instance rather than to a specific player. Any player can pick up any ritual item, but the items cannot be carried simultaneously by multiple people and cannot be duplicated. This means that in a 4-player co-op game, there's an implicit organizational question of who collects what. A player who grabs Floyd's championship belt can take it to Floyd's ritual altar, but the ritual itself provides the gateworm to whoever is present and interacting. Meaning one player could theoretically collect and complete all 4 rituals if the team distributed the collection duties and completion duties differently. This flexibility allows for varied team compositions and strategies, and it means that a well-organized group can complete the ritual phase faster than a disorganized one, making coordination itself a mechanical advantage in Morgue City. The night before the outbreak. According to the game's established timeline, the date of the events in Shadows of Evil is April 25th, the night everything falls apart, when the 4 characters lose consciousness at the Black Lace Burlesque and wake up alone in a zombie-infested Morgue City. This specific dating places the Shadows of Evil outbreak in a concrete temporal position relative to other events in the Dimension 63 timeline, and it gives the map's events a quality of historical precision that much of the Zombies universe lacks. The reporter whose phone booth messages you listen to throughout the map was communicating with Mr. Rapt in the weeks leading up to April 25th, her messages growing more frightened as that date approached. The meteor shower that disturbed the city's population happened before April 25th. The Shadow Man spent his months as Mr. Rapt building to April 25th with the patience of someone counting down to a date circled on a calendar. And on that specific night, with all the pieces arranged correctly, he let the trap close. The Keeper ghosts have character-specific appearances. During the flag defense sections of the Easter egg, each of the 4 players interacts with a Keeper ghost positioned at their specific character's ritual area. These ghosts aren't interchangeable. The ghost at Nero's altar presents differently from the ghost at Floyd's altar, and the visual distinction reinforces that each ritual ceremony is individual and specific to the character who performed it. When a player returns the flag to their ghost and the beam fires, completing that character's phase of the sequence, the ghost that dissipates afterward has fulfilled a purpose connected to that character's guilt and their specific act of ritual atonement. The Keeper ghosts are not monitoring the group as a collective. They're monitoring each individual redemption arc separately, evaluating whether the specific guilt connected to the specific sin that marked each person has been addressed through the specific ceremony designed for it. The Shadowmen build individual traps. The Keepers provide individual paths through them. The map's thematic core, guilt as vulnerability, everything in Shadows of Evil. The casting choices, the ritual items, the ceremony structure, the Shadow Man's recruitment strategy, the Apothicon language embedding sin into the universe's fabric, traces back to a single thematic proposition. Guilt makes you controllable. The 4 sinners weren't chosen because they were the most capable people in Morgue City. They were chosen because they were compromised. Each of them had done something they couldn't undo, couldn't confess, and couldn't escape. that specific psychological condition, carrying hidden guilt, desperate to avoid consequence, willing to perform extraordinary acts if those acts might resolve the unbearable weight of what you've done, is exactly what the Shadowman needed. He didn't need heroes. He needed people who were already looking for a way out of themselves. The redemption narrative he offered wasn't a lie exactly. Completing the rituals did provide a form of resolution. It just also provided him with everything he needed to destroy a dimension. Guilt as structural vulnerability is the oldest manipulation tool in existence, and a corrupted keeper who spent ages studying human psychology understood that better than the 4 people who walked into his city and called it survival. The map selection screen before and after, the Shadows of Evil map selection screen, has 2 distinct visual states that communicate the progress of the player's connection to the map's central narrative. Before completing Apocalypse Averted, the summoning key symbol in the corner of the screen is dark, an inert reference to the artifact you collected in your first seconds of the game, still waiting, still charged with potential. After completion, that symbol glows and the glow persists across subsequent sessions. This permanent visual change means that the map selection screen functions as a record of accomplishment that exists independent of in-game notification systems. You don't need to check your achievements or trophies to know whether a given player has completed the Easter egg. You check the map screen. The glow confirms everything. It also means that when a lobby of 4 players is deciding whether to attempt the Easter egg together, a quick look at everyone's screen reveals immediately who has been through the Morgue City narrative and who is experiencing it for the first time, creating the kind of group awareness that Treyarch clearly wanted when they built this visual confirmation into the map selection architecture. The Shadows of Evil ride, Treyarch's official description of Shadows of Evil, includes the evocative framing of it as Shadows of Evil, the ride, language borrowed from the classic movie studio experience rides of Hollywood's golden age, where a themed attraction walks guests through a narrative via environmental immersion. This framing is deliberate and intelligent. Morgue City isn't presented as a sandbox or an arena. It's presented as an experience. Something designed for you to move through, to discover, to be changed by in small ways. The 1940s noir aesthetic, the cast of character actors, the thematic depth beneath the surface mechanics, all of it points toward a design philosophy that treated the map as a constructed experience rather than a combat environment with lore attached. A ride takes you somewhere. It shows you things you wouldn't have seen otherwise, and it puts you back at the exit changed in small ways by what you witnessed. Shadows of Evil aspired to that quality, and the Shadows of Evil the ride framing acknowledges the ambition. Treyarch wasn't just making a zombies map. They were building a place. The summoning key travels on. After Richtofen takes the summoning key from the morgue, City Rift, at the end of Shadows of Evil's closing cutscene, the artifact doesn't rest. It appears in Der Eisendrache, Zetsubu no Shima, Gorod Krovi, and Revelations. Each DLC map representing another stop on Richtofen's multiverse journey as he collects souls and fulfills the requirements of whatever plan he and the Keepers are working to execute. The Shadowman's voice is audible from within the key across these maps, proving that the seal held, that the ceremony in Morgue City's Rift Chamber worked, that the 4 sinners completed rituals and the Keeper's intervention successfully imprisoned him. In Revelations, the final map of Black Ops 3's Zombies season, the summoning key's role in the larger story reaches its resolution. The object that one character found in a crate on a truck in a zombie-infested 1940s city becomes the linchpin of a multiverse-spanning effort to prevent dimensional collapse. Everything begins in Morgue City. Everything that begins there eventually reaches the end of a universe being unmade and remade. The key that started small, held in four sinners' hands, helps hold everything together.